In the small town of Maplewood, life moved at a slow and predictable pace. The streets were lined with modest houses, their front yards neatly trimmed and decorated with flower beds. Children played on the sidewalks, laughing as they chased each other, while adults exchanged greetings over white picket fences. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, and nothing exciting ever seemed to happen. Emily Parker was one of those children who brought light to the town. She had bright blue eyes that sparkled with curiosity, and long brown hair that she often tied back in a ponytail. At 12 years old, Emily was full of energy and wonder, always eager to explore the world around her. She loved spending time outdoors, especially in the woods behind her house where tall trees stretched toward the sky, and sunlight filtered through the leaves in golden beams. To Emily, the forest was magical, a place where anything could happen. Her father, Jack, was a quiet man who kept to himself most days. He wasn't like the other dads in Maplewood. While some fathers coached Little League or spent weekends fishing, Jack preferred solitude. He worked odd jobs around town, fixing cars or helping neighbors with repairs, but he rarely spoke about his past. The townsfolk whispered sometimes, wondering why such a strong and capable man chose to live such a simple life. Some guessed he had seen too much during his younger years, while others thought he might just be shy. Whatever the reason, no one pressed him for answers. Jack and Emily lived in a cozy house at the edge of town, close enough to the woods that Emily could step outside and disappear into nature within minutes. Their home was warm and inviting, filled with books, photographs, and handmade crafts. Emily loved her father deeply, even if she didn't understand him completely. She knew he cared for her more than anything else in the world, even if he wasn't the type to say it out loud. On this particular evening, Emily decided to take a walk in the woods after finishing her homework. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen counter and called out to her dad. "I'm going for a quick walk, okay?" Jack looked up from the book he was reading. His face softened slightly when he saw her standing there, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Don't go too far," he said, his voice calm but firm, "and stay on the path." "I will," Emily promised with a grin before heading out the door. The air in the forest was cool and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine needles and damp earth. Birds chirped softly in the distance, and the sound of rustling leaves followed Emily as she made her way deeper into the woods. She enjoyed the quiet here, away from the noise of town. Sometimes she imagined herself as an explorer discovering new lands or a scientist uncovering hidden secrets. As she walked, something unusual caught her eye. A faint glow emanating from behind a cluster of bushes. Curious, Emily approached, cautiously, shining her flashlight ahead of her. What she found took her breath away. Buried partially in the ground was a strange object, smooth and metallic, pulsing with a soft, otherworldly light. It looked like nothing she had ever seen before, certainly not something human-made. "What is this?" Emily whispered to herself, kneeling down to get a closer look. She reached out tentatively, her fingers brushing against the surface of the object. It felt cold, almost icy, despite the warmth of the evening. Suddenly, the glow intensified, and a low hum filled the air. Startled, Emily pulled her hand back, but before she could stand up and run, a beam of light shot down from above, surrounding her completely. Her heart raced as she shielded her eyes, trying to make sense of what was happening. Through the blinding light, shadowy figures began to emerge, tall, thin beings with elongated limbs and large black eyes. They moved silently, their movements fluid and deliberate. Emily froze, unable to scream or move as they circled her. One of the creatures stepped closer, tilting its head as if studying her. Its expression, or lack thereof, was unreadable, devoid of any emotion. Emily finally found her voice. Who are you?" she stammered, though she suspected deep down that these weren't humans. The creature didn't respond. Instead, it raised a long, spindly arm, pointing at the glowing object on the ground. Another figure joined it, and together, they communicated in a series of clicks and whistles that sounded alien and unnatural. Emily realized with growing dread that they were discussing her. that she was somehow connected to whatever this mysterious object was. Fear gripped her as she tried to back away, but her legs felt like lead. One of the aliens extended a hand, or what passed for a hand, and touched her shoulder. The sensation was electric, sending a jolt through her body. Panicked, Emily turned and bolted, running as fast as her legs would carry her. But the aliens were faster. In moments, they closed the distance between them, blocking her path. Emily screamed, her voice echoing through the forest, but no one was close enough to hear her. The last thing she saw before darkness overtook her was the cold, unblinking gaze of the alien leader. Then everything went silent. Back at the house, Jack sensed that something was wrong. Dinner was ready, and Emily still hadn't returned. Normally, she would have been back by now, eager to share stories about her adventure in the woods. But tonight there was only silence. Jack frowned, setting down the plate he had prepared for her. Something in his gut told him to act quickly. He grabbed a jacket and headed outside, calling out Emily's name as he walked toward the woods. The forest seemed eerier than usual, the shadows stretching longer as twilight gave way to night. Jack's footsteps crunched against the dry leaves, his senses sharp and alert. He scanned the area, looking for any sign of his daughter. It wasn't long before he found it, a piece of fabric snagged on a tree branch. He recognized it immediately as part of Emily's scarf. Nearby, the ground bore scorch marks, dark and unnatural against the dirt. Jack's jaw tightened as he knelt down, examining the area. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them good. For years, Jack had tried to leave his past behind, burying the skills and instincts that had once defined him. But now, those instincts roared back to life. Someone, or something, had taken Emily, and whoever they were, they had no idea who they were dealing with. Jack stood motionless in the forest, his eyes scanning the ground. The scorch marks were fresh, and the torn piece of Emily's scarf still clung to the tree branch, swaying slightly in the breeze. His hands clenched into fists as anger and fear churned inside him. For years he had kept his past hidden, choosing a quiet life far from danger. But now that life was shattered. Someone, or something, had taken his daughter, and Jack knew he couldn't stand by and do nothing. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. The woods around him grew darker as night settled in, but Jack didn't need light to see what mattered. He had been trained to notice details others would miss, to spot patterns, track movements, and think several steps ahead. His mind began working quickly, piecing together what little evidence he had. The burn marks on the ground suggested advanced technology, far beyond anything humans possessed. And the way Emily's scarf was torn indicated she hadn't gone willingly. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't an accident. Jack returned to the house, his thoughts racing. He locked the door behind him and went straight to the basement, a place Emily rarely visited. It was dusty and cluttered, filled with old tools, boxes, and forgotten belongings. But in one corner, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, was something Jack had hoped never to use again, a small metal case. He knelt down, prying the board loose with practiced ease, and opened the case. Inside were items from his former life, a pistol, extra ammunition, a knife, and a few gadgets that looked like they belonged in a spy movie. Jack stared at them for a moment, memories flooding back. These tools had once been part of his everyday existence, but now they felt foreign, almost alien. He hesitated for only a second before grabbing the weapons and stuffing them into a backpack. Next, he pulled out a map of the area, spreading it across the workbench. His fingers traced the outline of the woods where Emily had disappeared. If he was going to find her, he needed to think like the enemy. Whoever, or whatever, they were. They wouldn't have acted without purpose. There had to be a reason they took Emily, and Jack intended to find out. The first step was gathering more information. Jack knew he couldn't do this alone, not entirely. Though he preferred solitude, there were people who owed him favors, people who might still be willing to help. One name came to mind immediately: Daniel Meyer. Years ago, Daniel had been a scientist working alongside Jack on classified projects. They had parted ways when Jack left the military, but Daniel had always respected his skills. If anyone could shed light on what Jack was dealing with, it was him. Before leaving, Jack scribbled a note for Emily, just in case she somehow managed to return home while he was gone. "Stay safe," he wrote simply, taping it to the refrigerator door. Then he grabbed his keys and headed out into the night. The drive to Daniel's house was long and quiet. Jack's truck rumbled along deserted roads, the headlights cutting through the darkness. His mind replayed every detail of the scene in the woods, the scorch marks, the scarf, the eerie silence. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some random attack. Whoever had taken Emily knew exactly what they were doing. Daniel lived on the outskirts of town in a modest home surrounded by tall trees. Jack parked outside and knocked on the door, waiting impatiently as footsteps approached. When Daniel opened the door, he blinked in surprise. "Jack, what are you doing here?" he asked, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "I need your help," Jack said bluntly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. He explained everything: the strange object in the woods, the aliens, Emily's disappearance. Daniel listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each word. "This sounds impossible," Daniel admitted when Jack finished. "But if anyone can make sense of it, it's you. Have you considered the possibility that these aren't just random visitors? They might be studying us." "Studying us?" Jack repeated, his voice sharp. "They abducted my daughter." "I'm not excusing what they've done," Daniel said quickly. "But think about it. Advanced technology, precision tactics, it all points to intelligence gathering. Maybe they saw Emily interacting with the object and decided she was a threat." Jack frowned, considering the idea. It made sense. In a cold, calculated way, aliens wouldn't care about human emotions or relationships. To them, Emily might have been nothing more than a variable to eliminate. The thought made Jack's blood boil, but he forced himself to stay focused. Anger wouldn't bring Emily back. Action would. "What else do you know?" Jack asked. "Anything about sightings, reports, anything unusual lately?" Daniel nodded, leading Jack to his study. The room was cluttered with books, papers, and computer screens displaying complex diagrams. "There have been rumors," Daniel said, pulling up a file on one of the monitors. "Unidentified flying objects spotted over remote areas. Some farmers claim their livestock disappeared overnight. And then there's this." He pointed to a grainy photograph showing a glowing object similar to the one Jack described. Jack leaned closer, studying the image. "Where was this taken?" he asked. "About 50 miles north of here," Daniel replied. "Near Black Ridge Mountain. That area's been under surveillance for weeks, but no one's found anything concrete." Jack's mind raced. Black Ridge Mountain was rugged and isolated, the perfect place to hide a base. If the aliens were operating from there, it would explain why they chose Maplewood. A quiet, unassuming town where no one would suspect anything. "I'm heading there," Jack said firmly. "Are you insane?" Daniel exclaimed. "You're talking about going up against beings with technology we can't even comprehend. You'll be killed." Jack met his friend's gaze steadily. "If I don't try, Emily's as good as dead. I didn't ask for this fight, but I won't walk away from it either." Daniel sighed, knowing there was no changing Jack's mind. "Fine, but take this." He handed Jack a small device that looked like a flashlight. "It's a signal jammer. If those things are using tech to track you, this might buy you some time." Jack accepted the gadget, nodding in gratitude. "Thanks, Daniel. I owe you." "You owe me nothing," Daniel said quietly. "Just bring Emily back." With that, Jack left, his resolve stronger than ever. The drive to Black Ridge Mountain was tense, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He rehearsed his plan in his head, knowing full well it was risky. But risk had always been part of his life, whether he liked it or not. This time, though, it wasn't just about survival. It was about family. As he approached the base of the mountain, Jack parked his truck off the main road, hiding it among dense trees. From there, he continued on foot, moving silently through the shadows. The terrain was rough with steep inclines and jagged rocks, but Jack navigated it effortlessly. His training kicked in, sharpening his senses and keeping him alert. Hours passed as he climbed higher, the air growing colder with each step. Finally, he reached a clearing and stopped dead in his tracks. Before him stretched a massive structure, unlike anything he had ever seen. It shimmered faintly, its surface smooth and metallic, blending seamlessly with the surrounding landscape. Lights pulsed rhythmically across its surface, casting an otherworldly glow. Jack crouched low, observing carefully. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise and mechanical. For a moment, doubt crept into Jack's mind. How could he possibly take on such an advanced enemy? But then he remembered Emily's face, the fear in her eyes when she realized she was being taken. That image erased any hesitation. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was a father, and fathers fought for their children. Taking a deep breath, Jack tightened his grip on the weapon in his hand and prepared to move forward. Whatever lay ahead, he was ready. Jack crouched behind a cluster of rocks, his eyes fixed on the alien structure ahead. The building was massive, its surface shimmering like liquid metal under the dim light of the moon. Strange symbols glowed faintly along its walls, pulsing, in rhythm as if alive. Guards, tall, thin creatures with elongated limbs and large black eyes, patrolled the perimeter. Their movements were silent but deliberate, exuding an air of cold efficiency. Jack knew he couldn't afford to make a single mistake here. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, feeling the weight of the tools Daniel had given him. The signal jammer was tucked securely into his pocket, ready to be used if needed. His pistol rested in its holster at his side, though Jack hoped to avoid using it unless absolutely necessary. He wasn't just dealing with ordinary enemies. These beings had technology far beyond human comprehension. One wrong move could mean disaster, not just for him but for Emily. Taking a deep breath, Jack scanned the area again. There were gaps between the patrols, moments when the guards moved farther apart. Timing would be critical. He waited patiently, counting the seconds until the next gap appeared. When it did, he moved swiftly, staying low and keeping to the shadows. Each step was deliberate, calculated to minimize noise. Years of training had taught him how to move like a ghost, and now those skills were more important than ever. As he approached the base of the structure, Jack noticed something unusual. A small panel embedded in the wall near the ground. It looked different from the rest of the surface, slightly recessed and marked with a faint indentation. Jack knelt down, examining it closely. It reminded him of keypads he'd seen in secure military facilities, except this one didn't have buttons or a touchscreen. Instead, it seemed designed to respond to touch, or perhaps pressure. Jack hesitated for a moment before pressing his palm against the panel. To his surprise, it lit up instantly, emitting a soft hum. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passageway leading inside. Jack glanced around cautiously, ensuring no guards had noticed the movement. Then, gripping his weapon tightly, he stepped through the opening. The interior of the structure was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. The walls glowed faintly, casting an eerie blue light throughout the corridors. The air smelled strange, metallic and sharp, and the floor beneath. His feet felt unnaturally smooth, almost slippery. As he moved deeper into the facility, he began to hear sounds, low hums, clicks, and whistles that echoed eerily off the walls. These weren't human noises. They belonged to the aliens, communicating in ways Jack couldn't understand. He followed the corridor carefully, sticking close to the walls to stay out of sight. Along the way, he passed several rooms, their doors transparent and glowing softly. Inside, he saw humans, ordinary people, some unconscious, others strapped to machines. Jack's stomach churned as he realized what was happening. The aliens weren't just observing humanity. They were experimenting on them, studying them like lab rats. Tubes connected to the victims' bodies fed data into nearby consoles, while monitors displayed incomprehensible information. Jack clenched his jaw, forcing himself to keep moving. He couldn't save everyone. Not yet. His priority was finding Emily. But seeing the suffering of these strangers fueled his anger, making him even more determined to stop the aliens. Finally, after what felt like hours of searching, Jack reached a larger chamber at the heart of the facility. This room was different from the others. It was brighter, busier, and filled with advanced equipment. In the center stood a tall platform surrounded by machinery, wires, and glowing screens. Standing atop the platform was one of the aliens, taller and more imposing than the rest. Its presence commanded attention, and Jack guessed this was their leader. But what caught Jack's eye was the sight of Emily. She floated inside a containment pod suspended above the platform, her body encased in a translucent gel-like substance. Wires and sensors attached to her forehead and arms fed data into the surrounding machines. Her eyes were closed, her face pale but peaceful. She looked alive, but fragile, as if she were being drained of something vital. Jack's heart ached at the sight of his daughter trapped like that. For a moment he forgot where he was, overwhelmed by emotion, but then he remembered why he was here. He couldn't let himself get distracted. Not now. Staying hidden behind a console, Jack studied the layout of the room. Several guards stood watch near the platform, their weapons trained on anyone who might approach. More aliens worked at the machines, monitoring the data streaming from Emily's pod. Jack knew he couldn't take them all on directly, not without risking Emily's life. He needed a plan. Reaching into his pocket, Jack pulled out the signal Jammer Daniel had given him. If he could disrupt their systems even briefly, it might give him the opening he needed. Carefully, he activated the device, aiming it toward the central console. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the lights flickered and the hum of the machines grew louder, more erratic. The aliens paused, confused as their equipment malfunctioned. Seizing the opportunity, Jack sprang into action. Moving quickly, he fired his pistol at the nearest guard, disabling it with a precise shot. The aliens turned toward the sound, their movement swift but not fast enough to match Jack's speed. He darted between them, taking out 2 more guards before they could react. Chaos erupted in the chamber as alarms blared, filling the room with piercing noise. Jack reached the platform, his focus entirely on Emily. He examined the controls of the containment pod, searching for a way to release her. The interface was alien, covered in symbols he didn't recognize, but Jack had always been good at thinking on his feet. Spotting a lever-like mechanism near the base of the pod, he yanked it downward. With a hiss, the gel-like substance drained away and the pod opened. Emily slumped forward, unconscious but free. Jack caught her gently, lifting her into his arms. "I've got you," he whispered, holding her close. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel relief. But there was no time to linger. The aliens were regrouping, their confusion giving way to fury. Carrying Emily, Jack made his way back toward the exit. The corridors were now swarming with guards, responding to the alarm. Jack fought his way through, using every ounce of skill and strength he possessed. His movements were fluid and relentless, each strike calculated to incapacitate rather than kill. He didn't want to waste time finishing off enemies. His sole goal was escape. As he neared the entrance, the facility began to shake violently. Lights flashed and sparks flew from damaged machinery. Whatever damage Jack had caused to their systems was spreading, destabilizing the entire structure. The aliens screeched in panic, retreating deeper into the building as walls crumbled and ceilings collapsed. Jack pushed forward, shielding Emily with his body as debris rained down around them. Finally, he burst through the same passageway he had entered earlier, emerging into the cool night air. Behind him, the alien structure groaned and shuddered, its once gleaming surface cracking and crumbling. Jack didn't look back. He ran as fast as he could, putting as much distance between them and the collapsing base as possible. When he reached the edge of the forest, Jack finally stopped, setting Emily down gently on the ground. Her breathing was shallow but steady, and color was beginning to return to her cheeks. Jack knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. "You're safe now," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I promise." Above them, the alien structure exploded in a burst of light, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. Jack shielded Emily with his body once more, waiting until the rumbling subsided. When it was over, he picked her up again and started the long journey home. Though exhausted and battered, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had saved Emily, but he knew this wasn't the end. The aliens had shown interest in Earth, and they wouldn't stop coming. Jack realized he couldn't hide from his past any longer. If humanity was going to survive, someone would need to stand against the threat, and he was uniquely qualified for the job. For now, though, all that mattered was getting Emily back to safety. Together they would face whatever came next. Emily woke up slowly, her mind foggy and her body heavy. At first, she wasn't sure where she was. The last thing she remembered was the forest, the strange glowing object, the aliens, the blinding light. Panic surged through her as fragments of memory came rushing back. She tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pressed against her shoulder, keeping her still. "Easy," a familiar voice said softly. "You're safe now." Emily turned her head and saw her father sitting beside her bed. His face was tired, with dark circles under his eyes, but there was a warmth in his expression that made her feel instantly comforted. For a moment she just stared at him, unsure whether to cry or smile. Then tears spilled down her cheeks and she reached out, gripping his arm tightly. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What happened? Where were you?" Jack leaned closer, brushing hair from her forehead. "I was looking for you," he said simply. "And I found you. You're home now." Home. The word felt strange after everything she had been through. Emily glanced around the room, recognizing the familiar walls and furniture of her bedroom. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting golden patterns on the floor. It all seemed so ordinary, so peaceful. But Emily knew better. Her world had changed forever. Those things, she began haltingly. "They took me. They put me in some kind of machine. What did they want?" Jack hesitated, choosing his words carefully. He didn't want to scare her more than she already was, but he also knew she deserved the truth. "They're not from Earth," he explained. "They're studying us, trying to learn about humans. When they saw you near that object in the woods, they thought you were a threat." "A threat?" Emily echoed, incredulous. "I'm just a kid. To them, we're all just experiments," Jack said grimly. "But don't worry, they won't hurt you again. I made sure of that." Emily studied her father's face, noticing the bruises on his knuckles and the bandage wrapped around one arm. She realized then how much he must have risked to save her. "You went after them," she said quietly. "Didn't you?" Jack nodded. "I couldn't let them keep you, no matter what it took." For a long time they sat in silence, father and daughter holding on to each other. Emily felt a mix of emotions: gratitude, fear, confusion. But most of all, she felt safe. As long as her dad was there, she believed she could handle anything. Over the next few days, Emily began to recover physically, though the emotional scars ran deeper. Nightmares plagued her sleep, vivid images of the aliens' cold, unblinking eyes haunting her dreams. Jack stayed by her side whenever he could, offering quiet reassurance. He didn't push her to talk about what had happened unless she wanted to, understanding that healing would take time. But while Emily focused on getting better, Jack had his own battles to fight. He knew the aliens wouldn't stop coming, not after what he had done to their facility. Destroying their base had been a temporary victory, nothing more. If humanity was going to survive, they needed to prepare for the next attack, and Jack intended to make sure they were ready. He reached out to Daniel Meyer again, this time asking for help connecting with government agencies. Daniel agreed, using his old contacts to arrange a meeting between Jack and officials who specialized in alien encounters. Jack didn't trust governments easily. They had their own agendas after all. But desperate times called for desperate measures. The meeting took place in a secure location far from Maplewood. Jack drove there alone, leaving Emily with a neighbor who promised to keep an eye on her. When he arrived, he was greeted by a group of stern-faced men and women in suits. They introduced themselves as members of a task force dedicated to defending Earth from extraterrestrial threats. Their leader, a woman named Rachel Hayes, wasted no time getting to the point. "We've been monitoring reports of UFO activity for years," she said, spreading maps and photos across the table. "Your story matches what we've seen in other areas. These beings are advanced, intelligent, and highly organized. They view us as inferior, a resource to exploit. Jack listened intently, nodding along. And yet no one's doing anything about it, he said flatly. That's why we need people like you, Rachel replied. You've faced them directly. You know what they're capable of. We can offer you resources, training, protection, but only if you agree to work with us. Jack hesitated. Part of him wanted to say no, to retreat back to Maplewood and pretend none of this had happened. But he knew that wasn't an option anymore. The aliens had crossed a line when they took Emily, and Jack couldn't stand idly by while others suffered the same fate. I'll do it, he said finally. But I have conditions. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Name them. My daughter comes first, Jack said firmly. Whatever happens, she stays out of harm's way. And I don't answer to anyone blindly. If I think something's wrong, I act on my instincts, not orders. Rachel considered his demands for a moment before nodding. Fair enough. Welcome. Aboard, Jack. Back in Maplewood, life slowly returned to normal, or as close to normal as it could be. Emily went back to school, though she struggled to focus on lessons and homework. Her friends noticed the change in her, but she didn't. Tell them the truth. How could she explain something even she barely understood? Jack, meanwhile, threw himself into his new role. He worked closely with the task force, sharing information about the aliens' technology and tactics. In return, they provided him with advanced tools and weapons designed to counter extraterrestrial threats. Jack trained tirelessly, honing his skills and testing new equipment. He wasn't just preparing for another encounter. He was building a defense system to protect humanity. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Jack and Emily sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. Neither of them spoke for a while, content to simply enjoy each other's company. Finally, Emily broke the silence. Do you think they'll come back? She asked softly. Jack sighed, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his knees. Probably, he admitted, but we'll be ready for them. Together. Emily looked at him, her blue eyes filled with determination. I want to help, she said. I don't want to just sit here waiting. Jack smiled faintly, proud of her courage. You already helped, he told her, by surviving, by reminding me why we fight. But for now, your job is to live your life, to be happy. Leave the fighting to me. Emily nodded reluctantly, knowing he was right. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that her experience had changed her somehow. She wasn't the same girl who had wandered into the woods that fateful evening. She had seen things most people couldn't imagine, and she knew she would carry those memories with her forever. As darkness fell, Jack stood up and stretched. Come on, he said. Let's go inside. Tomorrow's a new day. Together they walked into the house, closing the door behind them. Outside, the stars twinkled brightly in the night sky, unaware of the battles being waged below. Somewhere out there, the aliens were watching, planning their next move. But Jack Parker was ready. Whatever came next, he would face it head-on, for Emily, for humanity, and for the future of Earth. Months passed, and life in Maplewood settled into a new rhythm. Emily returned to school, her friends noticing that she seemed quieter than before but assuming it was just a phase. Jack, on the other hand, divided his time between being a father and working with the task force. The government had set up a small base near town, hidden from prying eyes, where scientists and soldiers collaborated on strategies to defend Earth against alien threats. Jack became an integral part of the operation, sharing insights about the aliens' technology and tactics while training others in combat skills. Though he tried to keep Emily shielded from the dangers looming over their world, she couldn't help but feel connected to the fight. Her nights were still haunted by memories of the alien facility, the cold, emotionless faces of her captors, the strange machines, and the feeling of helplessness as she floated in the containment pod. But during the day, she found ways to cope. She started drawing pictures of what she remembered, sketching out designs of the alien technology and writing notes about how they behaved. At first, it was just for herself, a way to process everything she'd been through. But when Jack saw her work, he realized its value. "Emily," he said one evening, looking at her notebook filled with detailed drawings and observations. "This is incredible. You've got a real talent for this," she shrugged, embarrassed. "I just wanted to remember I didn't think it would be useful." "It is," Jack assured her. "These details could help us understand them better, maybe even predict what they'll do next." From then on, Emily joined Jack at the base occasionally, helping the team analyze data and brainstorm solutions. The scientists marveled at her sharp memory and keen eye for detail. Though she wasn't directly involved in combat planning, her contributions made a difference. For the first time since her ordeal, Emily felt like she was doing something meaningful, something that mattered. Meanwhile, Jack continued preparing for another encounter. He knew the aliens wouldn't stay away forever. They were intelligent, methodical, and driven by goals humanity couldn't fully comprehend. Destroying their base had only delayed them. Sooner or later they would return. And when they did, Jack intended to be ready. The task force worked tirelessly to develop countermeasures. Using samples of alien technology recovered from the wreckage of the destroyed facility, they reverse-engineered weapons capable of penetrating the aliens' defenses. They also created early warning systems to detect incoming ships, giving humanity a fighting chance if the aliens launched another attack. Jack pushed himself harder than ever, determined not to fail again. His days were long and grueling, filled with training sessions, strategy meetings, and late-night research. Despite the exhaustion, he refused to slow down. Every hour he spent preparing was another step toward ensuring Emily's safety and the safety of everyone else on Earth. But the weight of responsibility sometimes wore him down. Late at night, after Emily had gone to bed, Jack would sit alone on the porch, staring up at the stars. He wondered how many more civilizations existed out there watching Earth from afar. Were they all hostile? Or were some of them peaceful, curious beings who simply wanted to explore? These questions lingered in his mind unanswered. One evening, as Jack sat outside, Emily joined him carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. She handed one to him and sat down beside him, pulling her knees to her chest. "Do you think we'll ever meet friendly aliens?" she asked suddenly. Jack smiled faintly. "Maybe," he said. "But right now, we have to focus on the ones who want to hurt us. If we can stop them, maybe someday we'll find the good ones." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think we're strong enough?" "We have to be," Jack replied. "Because if we're not, no one else will be." The aliens returned 3 months later. It happened without warning. A massive ship descended from the sky, hovering silently above Black Ridge Mountain. Its presence was impossible to miss, a glowing behemoth casting eerie shadows across the landscape. Alarms blared at the base, alerting the task force to the imminent threat. Within minutes, Jack was suited up and ready to go, armed with advanced weapons and tactical gear. Before leaving, he found Emily in the command center, surrounded by monitors displaying live footage of the alien ship. She looked pale but resolute, her hands clenched into fists. "Dad," she said, stepping forward. "Be careful." "I will," Jack promised, kneeling down to look her in the eye. "You stay here, okay? This is my fight." "I know," Emily whispered. "But I'm proud of you." Those words stayed with Jack as he climbed into a transport vehicle with the rest of the team. They drove toward the mountain, the air tense with anticipation. When they arrived, the alien ship loomed overhead, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. Smaller vessels detached from the main craft, descending to the ground in perfect formation. Jack and his team took cover behind rocks and trees, waiting for the aliens to make the first move. When the creatures emerged, they moved with precision, scanning the area with devices that emitted low hums. Jack signaled for his team to hold their positions until the aliens were close enough to engage. Then, with a burst of speed, he sprang into action, firing specially designed projectiles that disrupted the aliens' energy shields. His teammates followed suit, creating chaos among the invaders. The battle was fierce and relentless. The aliens fought back with devastating weapons, forcing Jack and his team to constantly adapt their strategies. Despite the odds, Jack remained focused, remembering the promise he had made to Emily. He wasn't just fighting for himself, He was fighting for her, for everyone counting on him to protect them. As the skirmish raged on, Jack spotted a weak point in the alien ranks. A control unit mounted on one of the smaller ships. If he could disable it, the entire operation might collapse. Without hesitation, he broke away from the group, sprinting toward the target. Laser blasts whizzed past him, narrowly missing his head, but he pressed on, fueled by adrenaline and determination. Reaching the ship, Jack planted a charge on its hull and activated the timer. As he ran back to rejoin his team, the explosion rocked the battlefield, sending shockwaves through the air. The alien forces faltered, their coordination disrupted. Seizing the opportunity, the task force launched a final assault, driving the remaining invaders back toward their ship. Moments later, the alien vessel ascended into the sky, retreating into the darkness of space. The ground trembled as the massive craft disappeared from view, leaving behind scorched earth and shattered trees. Exhausted but victorious, Jack and his team regrouped, tending to their wounded and assessing the damage. Back at the base, Emily waited anxiously for news of the battle. When Jack finally walked through the door, covered in dirt and sweat but alive, she threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. "You did it," she said, her voice shaking. "You stopped them." "For now," Jack corrected, gently, hugging her tightly. "But there will be more fights ahead, and we'll win those too," Emily declared firmly. "Together." Jack smiled, knowing she was right. Humanity had faced countless challenges throughout history, and they had always found a way to persevere, with people like Jack leading the charge, and brave souls like Emily standing beside them. They stood a chance against whatever the universe threw their way. As father and daughter embraced, the sun began to rise over Maplewood, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink. It was a new day, full of hope and possibility. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side, united in their determination to protect the world they loved.